Welcome back to Klepper's Corner Today in History, the show where we rummage through humanity's junk drawer for the days that shaped civilization, shook the planet, and occasionally reminded us that people have never known what they're doing, not even a little. Today is January 13th, a date so loaded with upheaval, revolution, scientific heresy, and preventable disasters that if the calendar had parental controls, this day would definitely be blocked. So, buckle up, because January 13th is basically the historical version of that friend who says, "I'm not doing anything crazy tonight," and then 3 hours later is being escorted out of a Chili's. Segment 1, the day Rome pretended the Republic still existed. January 13th, 27 BC, the day Augustus pulled off the greatest political illusion since someone convinced America that the McRib is seasonal for economic reasons. Picture the Roman Senate in full panic mode, clutching their togas, because Rome has been in civil war for decades, and they know that if they sneeze at the wrong moment, another one might start. And then in walks Octavian, future Augustus, wearing the smug expression of a man who has controlled the army so long he's forgotten what it's like to not own a continent. And he says, "Gentlemen, I am humbly returning all my powers to you." And the Senate, who knows what happens to people who don't clap for strongmen, immediately replies, No, please. We insist you keep absolute control. Our backs just can't handle the weight of freedom." This is the moment Rome officially transitions from republic to republic, but with an asterisk. And that asterisk is the size of the Colosseum. Augustus gets control of the provinces with all the armies: Gaul, Spain, Syria, while the Senate gets control of basically the Roman equivalent of Vermont. It's like giving one guy the Pentagon and telling the Senate they can manage a Bed Bath & Beyond. And the best part? Augustus takes the title Princeps, meaning first citizen, which is adorable because he is very much not a citizen. He is the operating system. He is the firmware. He is the guy who, if he rebooted, the whole empire would blue screen. January 13th is the day the Roman Republic quietly, politely, and with great constitutional enthusiasm died of natural causes. Segment 2, Lithuania versus the USSR, how unarmed people beat tanks. Jump to January 13th, 1991, because if Rome taught us how empires begin, Lithuania taught us how they end. The Soviet Union is falling apart, like a Jenga tower built by a toddler who insists on using only the middle pieces. Lithuania has declared independence, and the USSR responds by sending tanks, elite troops, and enough military equipment to make Tom Clancy write a sequel. But what they didn't count on were thousands of unarmed civilians forming a human wall around the Vilnius TV tower. These people face tanks with the same energy Americans bring to Black Friday. "I'm not moving. I'm committed. I have been training my whole life for this." And when the tanks rolled forward, literally into crowds, Lithuania didn't break. They documented everything. They broadcast everything until soldiers stormed the studio. And suddenly, the world saw what Moscow insisted wasn't happening: civilians resisting empire in real time. You can't spin that, not even with a Soviet propaganda machine powered by Cold War-grade denial. January 13th became a national day of remembrance in Lithuania, but globally, it became proof that empires fall when the people stop playing along. January 13th, a day for dramatic reversals. Segment 3, J'accuse, the birth of the loud, annoying, necessary intellectual. Now we travel to 1898 Paris, a place where the air is thick with cigarette smoke and even thicker with political scandal. Captain Alfred Dreyfus, a Jewish officer, has been wrongly convicted of treason. The French army knows he's innocent, but decides, we could fix this, or we could double down and ruin the country's reputation. Decisions. Enter Émile Zola, a writer so bold, so dramatic, so dedicated to truth that he publishes the now legendary J'accuse on the front page of a newspaper. It is basically the 19th century version of subtweeting your entire government. He names names, he points fingers, he accuses ministers, generals, bureaucrats, basically the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe of French political incompetence. And he does it knowing full well he will be prosecuted, which he is, because France cannot handle a man with receipts. But January 13th is the day that changed everything. Without J'accuse, Dreyfus rots on Devil's Island. With it, the case explodes into a national reckoning about justice, anti-Semitism, and what happens when institutions operate like a group project where everyone lies about doing their part. Zola is convicted, flees to England, and the French army continues to insist it is infallible, a position they will adjust roughly 16 years later when World War I says, "Bonjour, messieurs, let's test that theory." Segment 4, Nature versus Humanity, the Avezzano earthquake and Black Friday bushfires. January 13th doesn't just carry political disasters. Sometimes the Earth itself clocks in and says, "Your civilization? Cute. Watch this." First, Avezzano, Italy, 1915. A 6.7 magnitude earthquake strikes at breakfast, because of course it does. Avezzano is reduced to rubble, a 96% casualty rate. Italy, already wobbling on the edge of World War I, suddenly realizes it is extremely expensive to be a country built on both seismic fault lines and questionable masonry. Then, Victoria, Australia, 1939, the Black Friday bushfires. Temperatures high enough to melt steel beams and probably several Australians' patience. Over 2 million hectares burned. Entire towns vanish. The sky looks like someone set the continent on broil. Both events expose the exact same truth. Humans are fantastic at politics, terrible at understanding geology, and weather, and forestry, and structural engineering, and emergency planning, and listening to people who say, "Hey, maybe don't build a whole town out of kindling." January 13th is nature's reminder that it can end your civilization before lunch. Segment 5, Johnny Cash at Folsom Prison, the concert that hit harder than parole denial. On January 13th, 1968, Johnny Cash walked into Folsom Prison and basically told country music, "Scoot over, daddy's home." His career had been wobbling. Drugs, depression, the music industry wondering if the man in black had maybe turned into the man in beige. And then he performs for inmates, records it live, and America collectively goes, "Oh, this is what authenticity sounds like." Cash belts out songs about heartbreak, confinement, injustice, and the prisoners respond with an energy you can't fabricate in a studio. This is the real stuff, unfiltered, unpolished, the opposite of everything pop music was becoming. The album resurrects his career. It changes how Americans view prisoners, and it proves that sometimes the most important artistic moments come from places society pretends don't exist. January 13th, where redemption gets a soundtrack. Segment 6, Galileo looks up and accidentally breaks medieval Europe. January 13th, 1610. Galileo looks through a telescope, which in 1610 is basically a pirate spyglass that went to STEM camp, and sees the moons of Jupiter clearly moving around the planet. This is a problem, because the official position of everyone in charge is everything revolves around Earth. Because, of course it does. We're special. Have you seen our hats? Galileo's observation is the cosmic equivalent of finding out you're not the main character. You're just an NPC in someone else's game. Suddenly, the universe is big, Earth is small, and the church is very, very annoyed. If Twitter had existed in 1610, Galileo would have been trending with hashtags like fake moons and space lies. But January 13th is when he got the data that would unravel centuries of certainty. And once you prove that not everything revolves around Earth, people start wondering what else doesn't revolve around Earth. Authority, for example. January 13th, the day the cosmos said, plot twist. Segment 7, Air Florida Flight 90. tragedy, heroism, and how not to handle snow. Finally, January 13th, 1982, Washington, D.C., a blizzard, a frozen Potomac River, and a Boeing 737 that takes off without activating its anti-ice system. Because apparently someone thought the plane should raw dog the weather. It crashes into the 14th Street Bridge, then into the river. It is horrific. But then humanity shows up. Not the structural engineering kind of humanity. That part failed spectacularly. No, the individual kind. A man named Lenny Skutnik dives into the freezing water to save a drowning passenger. Another survivor, Arlen D. Williams Jr., passes the rescue line to others again and again until he disappears beneath the ice. Strangers rush in, risking their lives. January 13th is a tragedy, but also a reminder that even when systems collapse, people don't always fall with them. Some rise, some leap. Some dive into the Potomac when no one else dares. In conclusion, January 13th isn't just a date. It's a highlight reel of humanity under pressure. The powerful consolidating, the powerless resisting, the earth shaking, the fires raging, the artists rebelling, the scientists revealing, and ordinary people doing extraordinary things. It's a day that says history is made not just by emperors or empires, but by citizens standing before tanks, singers standing before inmates, thinkers standing before governments, and heroes standing before icy rivers. January 13th is a reminder that every era, every nation, every system is fragile, but the human capacity for courage, curiosity, and stubborn hope is not. And that's why we keep coming back to these stories, because they tell us who we've been and who we still are.